Yo, what's good, Celtics fans? Happy Monday. How y'all doing? As usual, I'm your boy Adam Taylor. As usual, I'm joined by my homie, my compadre, my co-host in crime, Mr. Tim Shields. What's poppin', Tim?
Nothing much, man. Just beating the heat. Kind of sad the summer is kind of over with Summer League now. Now we're kind of in this point where we're waiting for preseason basketball and sort of seeing how this roster shakes out. I know we had the news drop late on Saturday night following that last game against the Nets, but Cabengele sticks around on that two-way contract.
Yeah, I mean, I'm down with that. Like I said on the last episode of this show that I would have preferred to give that to somebody like Travion because I feel like Kabengele can find a roster spot somewhere around the league. But if you're looking at Boston's kind of perspective, they want to be a deep team. Kabengele gives them an extra option as a big man throughout the regular season. Obviously, he's limited in the amount of games he can play. There's no playoffs available for him because he's a two-way guy. But you still have enough opportunity that, you know, maybe Rob Williams needs to sit out and you need a guy to back up Luke Kornet. Then you can bring in Kabengele. And obviously, I want them to go and find another rotational big man that can fit into that roster as well. But I'm not mad at that. I think he was by far the best player in the Summer League for Boston. He was by far the most impactful big man for the Celtics. He clearly outplayed Travion Williams. I'm not mad at it at all. I mean, this is a good story. Last year, wasn't Kabengele playing in the British Basketball League? Which is
I can
basically
double check that, but
it's basically like low-level high school American basketball. It's not like, I mean, I'm probably being a little bit disrespectful there, but it's not a great standard. It's not a good standard. So for Cabengele to kind of come back over to Summer League and really like impact winning to a point where they offer him a two-way deal, like that says a lot about the growth he's made. Maybe I am underselling the British Basketball League. Who knows? I'm British. I don't like British basketball, so maybe it's that.
I don't see on here that he played, but you might have that somewhere. I know that at one point he was playing for the G League's Aqua Caliente Clippers. This was back when he was with LA. He did get drafted in the first round, 27th overall in the 2019 draft. He is 24. He will be 25 in August. Last before that, he played Rio Grande, the Rio Grande Valley Vipers of the G League. That was when he was waived right after Houston. And then obviously we had him on for the Summer League with the Celtics. So there's an opportunity there. He's still young enough. I think what we saw from him was good enough to warrant at least a two-way spot. I was in the mindset I thought that we'd potentially see Travion in that spot, and then maybe Cabengele would get one of those like end of bench roster spots, but they're keeping them open, which is interesting. And this kind of does tie into the Luke Kornet situation. We touched upon it a little bit before, I think, last podcast, but it seems like the Celtics have a lot of faith in Luke Kornet, and I don't know how much of that is just table talk and just saying that so they don't lose any kind of leverage in trades. But as of right now, as we record this, the Celtics have till the end of the day on the 18th to use that trade exception if they want to, which makes me wonder if they've got some kind of move in the works. They're just sitting on it, waiting to see if something better rolls around before that trade exception expires. I get the idea that you won't want to take on any more tax dollars, but at the same time, you can't afford to be thin in the depth chart. And right now, that center spot's probably, I think that has to be the softest spot in their roster. You could argue maybe their wings are a little bit, but I think that big man spot is a little soft.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to Luke Kornet, I've got a lot of thoughts. So I think that defensively, he's quite sound. You know, he's definitely a drop big. 7'2", can guard the rim really well. One of the main reasons Brad Stevens liked him when Brad was still coaching was because he can read pick and roll offense really well. Reacts quite good. His lateral movement's not terrible. However, if he's beat off the dribble, it's over. I don't think he has the hip dexterity to be able to change directions quickly enough to recover to smaller guys. If you look at the way the Celtics play, it's primarily a switch 1 through 5. So when you're switching 1 through 5, if Luke Kornet's there, really you're switching 1 through 4 with your 5-man in drop. Now, we saw the Celtics do that against the Golden State Warriors. We saw them do it against Steph a lot. They were switching 1 through 4, having the 5-man in drop. When Steph started to cook them, they'd still start the pick and roll defense with their 5 in drop, but he would step up to the level of the screen shortly after the screen took place to take away Steph's shooting space and then to try and force the ball out of his hands. That's a role Luke Kornet can play. He can play up to touch on defense. And when it's up to touch, it just means you can physically touch the screener. That's up to touch. I can touch him. And then you can either hedge over the screen, you can drop to stay in front of the man, you can double, you can do what you want. Now, outside of the pick and roll defense, I'm not sold that Kornet's going to be a switchable guy. I mean, he switched a little bit in Maine last year. We saw it a little bit in like garbage time, but what I find is he ends up like, he doesn't challenge shots vertically when he's closing out. He jumps directly into you. It's just a foul waiting to happen. So I think they are going to ask him to play a little bit off his man. And then, you know, if that guy starts hitting mid-range jumpers, you adjust or you just live with it. Now, if you want to look at the opponent field goals, this is everything that opponent shot while being defended against Kornet last season. So as you can see, held guys to 43% around the rim. That's solid. 27% from the left wing, 36% from the right wing. You can see all the percentages. That's fine. I mean, if you look at the amount of attempts that are being made, you can see where he was dropping just below the free throw line for most of them, and then he did kind of have to close out here and there, which is completely acceptable, and I'm fine with that. But my biggest question is, okay, you trust him. His defense is okay. It's an NBA level standard for a 7'2" big man. He can stretch the floor. He can operate a little bit as a pick and roll guy. He can screen quite well. He runs handoffs on the elbows. That's cool. But is he a rotational big on a championship contender? That's my biggest question right now. Not can he be impactful? Is he an impactful player for the team? Is he the third best big man on a team that is trying to win an NBA championship? If the answer is no, you need to go out there and find somebody. If the answer is yes, then you need to start convincing people, because right now, I think if Luke Kornet's the fourth big on your depth chart, you're in a really good spot. If he's the third big on your depth chart for a team that plays double big, now you're not in the best spot, man, because Al's going to miss time. He's getting older. He needs to rest. Rob Williams is going to miss time because he's Rob Williams. Grant Williams can play small ball 5, sure. Is it really ideal? Not really. You want him at the 4. That's where he was impactful last season. Gallinari can play some 5. Cool. It was a disaster during his time with the Hawks. You know, whenever Atlanta put him in at the 5, those defensive minutes were absolutely disastrous. You want him playing the 4, or you want him going big at the 3. You need that of a big man. I'm really, really like, how can I put it? I'm urging people to be like, yo, Kornet's sound at the 4. I'm cool. Sorry, at the 4th rotational big man spot. He's fine there. As the 3rd big on this rotation, which is essentially your first center off the bench, I'm not sure I'm sold there.
Well, I think that's the issue, right? Is because if Boston's going to run out 2 bigs, then that means you have to figure out how you're going to stagger those minutes. And if that means that you're throwing Kornet into first center off the bench, unless you're going small, or it's a situation where you've got Rob and Al starting, and then about 5-10 minutes in, you cycle out Al for, Grant, or you cycle in Gallinari, like you find someone to go throw in at the 4, then it's like, okay. But even then, you still had some of those issues like later on in the playoffs. And again, Al is another year older. We have to see how the recovery from that injury for Rob impacts his minutes moving forward, if they try and do any kind of load management to make sure that he's healthy, because ultimately, like, him being healthy makes or breaks the season, like, because that's where the center depth is. He's your lead center. He's your lead big man. You need him to be healthy, which is why it makes sense if you're gonna put your money where your mouth is, then you figure out, okay, who's the best center that I can get with the trade exception, just to bolster that spot. It's not that I dislike Luke Kornet. It's just asking him to step into that kind of role, to be that kind of center on this roster. It was difficult for Daniel Tice to do that. And granted, like, they're different players, but by that same token, you need someone who's a little bit more mobile. And I just don't know if I could put that much faith in Luke to be that third big, as you said, and essentially the first center off the bench.
First of all, real quick, look at the Space Jam chili bottle.
Oh, damn, I like that. Where'd you get that?
I know, Zoe got it for me. The wife got it.
Oh, love it.
Yeah, I just wanted to show it off because it's dope. When it comes to the big, like, look, I've always been, well, I say always, this offseason, I've been really focused on finding a way to mimic Rob's minutes. So that means finding another rim runner. Why? because you saw switching 1 through 4 with 5 in drop was problematic at times. It's easier to exploit. It's harder to exploit when everybody's switching aggressively. They're all, and then, you know, players start plugging in, coming out, plugging in new bench players, but the system stays the same. There's less of a transition of thought, like, oh, well, Rob would be here, but Rob's not on the floor now. Kornet's here, so Kornet's going to be down by the free throw line. We need to plug that guy. That's just one extra thing to think about. Finding another rim runner to kind of match those minutes. Obviously, the impact won't be the same. The rim protection, the above the rim play. There's always going to be a drop off when you're going from an all NBA like defensive guy or like that type of caliber to a rotational big. But somebody like, I don't know. I mean, this is, people are going to hate this, but somebody like Dwight Howard makes sense. I was a big fan of JaVale McGee being a target. Obviously, he got paid. He went elsewhere. But that type of mold where it's you're coming in, it's rebounding, running the floor, offering some vertical spacing and some screening. Now, Kornet can do most of that, but he's not explosive. Obviously, he's tall, so he can give you some spacing above the rim that way just because he's long. But he's not a rim runner by any means. You know what I mean? He's more of a screener, half-court type of set things up with the dribble handoffs, with your off-ball pin downs and whatever. I want somebody that's more in Udoka's mold, which is we're going to bully ball you, we're going to set screens, and we're going to ram the ball down your throat. Now, Dwight Howard's old, so he's not really the ideal candidate, but I have talked myself into him being a decent fit. DeMarcus Cousins could do that. You know, if you want to go cheaply, Cousins isn't a rim runner either. He's more of a screen guy, but his rebounding's a high level. He can stretch the floor a little bit, and he's going to give you a physical presence on the low post. I don't think Kornet gives you that presence either. He's too wiry. He's going to be more of a kick out guy from that low post area, but I don't think his passing's on the level of like a Rob or an Al. That's why Cabengele makes sense in a way, because he's more of that rim running archetype that's going to be physical on that block. He's going to really make you feel his presence. Now, again, he's a two-way guy. He's going to be in main for the majority of the season. We will get to see him, but look, at the end of the day, two-way guy is never going to be out a full-time contract on the depth chart. So you do need to find somebody else. Now, I'm not against Kornet. I'm writing a piece on Kornet right now. I think he's a good fit. I just think you need another player that fits more along the rim running archetype than what you've got in the bank at the moment. That's my biggest issue.
Yeah, and I think that's fair, because I think if you're talking about how the Celtics team needs to operate and how the offense needs to operate, you need to be able to have someone who can run and push the pace, and you're not going to get that with Kornet. And I do like him. Again, like this isn't a commentary on not liking Luke Kornet. I think this is more so having the Celtics be as deep as humanly possible at a spot that is an injury concern. We still don't know how Al's going to hold up. And I think they want to manage his workload as much as they can, which means that whoever is that third big on that roster is going to be taking some serious workload minutes. And I don't feel comfortable putting that kind of pressure on Luke Kornet to perform. And I don't know if he necessarily fits the style of play that the Celtics play consistently. When he's on the floor, they have to change the way that they handle defensive coverages. They have to handle the way that they push the pace. It's just a different style of basketball. And it's not that it's bad. It's just not the ideal way that Celtics need to play.
I mean, and then you can look at the other options available, you know, like Mason Plumlee, somebody that I've seen floated around. He's a decent passer, big. Maxi Kleber is pretty much the ideal fit, but he's expensive. I think that, you know, there's going to be some assets that need to be thrown in there. Pirtle's another guy that would be ideal, but I just don't see San Antonio giving him up for cheap. I could think you could talk them into giving him up, but the assets you need to send out the opposite way. I'm not sure Brad Stevens is going to be comfortable there. Who else have you got, really? If you've got Nerlens Noel could be an option. Kelly Olynyk's another option. There are options available. The downside is they're all going to put you further into the tax. Now, do Boston want to wait and try and strike a deal using different TPE closer to the trade deadline so they save a few months of salary? That's an option. I mean, at the end of the day, I've kind of looked at it as the Malcolm Brogdon trade took away the need to use this TPE because you got a better player in that trade than what you would get with that TPE. So whereas people are like, oh, if you don't use the TPE, it's malpractice. starting of the offseason, and I personally totally agreed. It was negligence if you didn't use the TPE. But then after the Brogdon trade, now I'm kind of like, well, it's overkill if you do use it. Do you want to use some of it? Sure, go ahead. You've got till midnight. You've got till midnight today to go and use some of that TPE, and that's midnight Eastern. If you don't, cool. You've got other TPEs available. There's some big men on the free agent market that could work, or you can, maybe you don't envision time for Peyton Pritchard this season. You want to package him in a second round pick or a future first that's protected, and try and bring in a Nerlens Noel, maybe throw an extra guy in there and try and pick up a Jakob Poeltl or a Maxi Kleber. Then fine, go and do what you need to do. But I do think that there's not a huge sense of urgency now. I think when Brad Stevens said that he had every faith in Luke Kornet, I think he was being genuine. I don't think he was paying lip service. And if they are that confident that Kornet can give them what they need, then I don't see them rushing out to find a big man straight away. I think it's going to be when the right player becomes available or the right fit becomes available, they make a move. Brad Stevens shown that he's willing to play the game. He's willing to wait and find the right guy. Who saw Brogdon coming?
No one.
That's what I'm saying. So, for all we know, it's going to be DeAndre Ayton in January. And obviously I'm being sarcastic when I say this, but that's the Brad Stevens mantra right there. So it's
sneaky,
possible.
sneaky. Real G's move in silence, and Brad's been pretty quiet. Yeah. I mean, I guess at the end of the day, I'm fine with them not using the TPE and using a vet minimum to go out and get someone who is seasoned, who fits the needs of the roster, or at least gives them an edge and gives them some more depth. I think Boogie, if you're trying to buy low, makes a lot of sense. He's a bit of a bully still. He's still got that edge to him. That adds a little bit of toughness to this team. So I guess I'm really open to any kind of addition as long as it's someone who is at least somewhat competent, that you can at least feel comfortable throwing some decent rotation minutes, or if you have to have them, throw them in for a spot start or something, you can feel comfortable in doing so. I mean, whoever you go and get out there, unless you're paying through the nose, like going out for a guy like Jakob Poeltl, like you're going to be getting a third string center. Like in my mind, I don't think Jakob Poeltl is a third string center. Like that is a very high caliber rotation big, very high caliber. That's why he's getting paid the money he is. And that's why it would cost so much in assets to go get a guy like that.
And but Nerlens Noel, right? I don't see this, I think I'm viewing it differently because I don't see whoever comes in. I don't see Kornet as a third string center, because when I look at the depth chart, I'm like, Robert Williams is going to play the 5. Al Horford is primarily going to be at the 4. So I'm putting Al Horford in the 4 spot. So that puts Kornet as the second string big man. Now, I get that you're going to have Horford and Robert play interchangeably in that 5 throughout a game. And it's very rare we're going to see the need to bring Kornet in for long minutes. But true, if you want to look at a depth chart and write it out, Al Horford, Grant Williams, Gallinari, they can play the 5. They're primarily going to play the 4. Grant might slide to the 3. Gallinari might slide to the 3 if they go big. You might slide Gallo over to the 5 or Grant over to the 5 if you go small. But as a traditional 5, Kornet is realistically, he is the third string center, but he's going to be playing second string center minutes.
That scares me.
That's what bothering me, because there will be times where Al Horford and Rob are both off the floor together, and now Kornet is the guy you're leaning into. Obviously, there's going to be times where you need to go small, and Kornet's buried down on the bench. But just having that extra option, one more guy, preferably a rim runner, or preferably somebody that can impact the rim, impact the glass, and then give you something on the perimeter as a bit of playmaking, whether that be through handoffs, through screening, or just through movement. Cool, that's fine. I want that. I just think that Kornet, you're asking this guy to go from being a garbage break glass in case of emergency big man that spent most of last year in the G League to being an important part of the rotation. You're asking for that jump in one summer. And I just think you need that extra guy, because I'm not saying Kornet isn't capable, but if Kornet kind of has this learning curve to deal with, and you don't have somebody else there to kind of ease those minutes, there's going to be a problem.
Yeah, and I don't think it's really fair to Kornet either. You're putting him in a spot where it's like, okay, you have to jump into this big role because we literally don't have anyone else. We need someone to be able to eat some minutes at the 5. Can you do that? I mean, this was a guy who was playing on 10-day contracts for a little bit. Then he signed rest of year contract last season for the Celtics to be back here. And then they went ahead and they gave him an extension. Like they got him a new deal, 2 years, I believe. So
yeah, 2 years. I don't think a lot of it's guaranteed. I think it's like half a year guaranteed. But that's not the point.
The point is that like if they had faith in it, that they would have thrown a bigger contract.
Exactly, bro. Like
I don't. That's the thing. Where I think Brad's being earnest, but I just don't. I don't have that same level of faith. I just don't.
No, me neither. And look, man, by the time we record our next episode later this week, we're going to know what's happening. Right now, not much is happening. So we'll see. I don't expect to see anything happen, but that means Brad Stevens is going to pull something out the bag and all of a sudden we're going to end up with Joel Embiid. You know what I mean? Obviously, I'm being incredibly facetious when I say that. It's not meant as any form of true belief. With that, make sure you hit that like button, that subscribe button. Leave a comment. I should have done this at the beginning, but I didn't. Oh, well. And we'll be back later in the week. As usual, you can find me and Tim over on any of the socials shown on screen. That was a tongue twister. Until then, peace out.
Cheers.